Hi there! Welcome to Cook Local, Eat Local, the podcast where you can find inspiration, tips, and recipes for enjoying more local food and drink. I am David Crowley, your host. In today's episode, we'll be talking with Marwin from Food Fidelity about what to make with our latest CSA pickup. First, let's check out what we have this time. Okay, time to see what's in this week's CSA share. All right, first up, we have some sugar snap peas. I think that's 3 weeks in a row. All right, we're gonna have to do something different with those. Next up, romaine lettuce. All right, that's a favorite kind of lettuce around here. Very good. And next, definitely know you're hitting midsummer when you start getting a lot of squash. I have 4 yellow summer squash. I know there's some other squash here. Oh yeah, there are the other squash. We have zucchini. Definitely folks who garden have been known to get more than enough zucchini. A little more moderated when you do a CSA share, but we'll see our fair share of zucchini, I'm sure, and be figuring out creative things to do with it. Next up, we have some broccoli, and we are always looking for broccoli for different things. Oh, we actually have regular broccoli and broccolini, again, which we had last week as well. And we have, the first time this year, some nice string beans, green beans. I guess they're the same thing, right? I don't know, we could check with our guest on that. We have some green beans, either way you want to call them. And let's see, oh yeah, this is what I was really excited about. I heard rumors that we were gonna get our first local corn of the season in this week's share, and sure enough, we have 4 ears of corn. And well, many of these things we're looking for recipes. We're just gonna eat this tonight the old-fashioned way. So steam it quickly, and some butter and salt, and looking forward to that. But anyway, we look forward to chatting with our guest tomorrow to talk more about what we can do with all this great vegetables we have in this week's share. Oh yeah, and one more thing, we do have, once again, second week in a row, some fresh local blueberries. I've been loving putting those on my cereal every morning. Love blueberry season. So anyway, another great haul this week, and we look forward to chatting about it, and better yet, cooking with it. Now it's time for our interview with Marwin Brown. Marwin is a consumer insights pro by day, food blogger and recipe developer for Food Fidelity by night, and husband and father of 2 all day, every day. Food Fidelity is a weeknight-focused food and music blog where Marwin shares mostly quick and easy modern takes on what soul food is and can be for busy home cooks. He believes good music makes food taste better, so every recipe is inspired and paired with a dope song. Hi Marwin, welcome to Cook Local, Eat Local.
Great. Thanks for having me on. Awesome to be here. How are you?
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And we're just doing audio here, but I see you even have a t-shirt for your website, Food Fidelity. And so that's pretty cool. I need to think about that for cooking chat. Well branded, good to see. How long have you had Food Fidelity, actually?
So I just hit year 5 this past May.
Oh,
Yeah, it seems a lot longer, but it's only 5 years.
that's a good milestone. So congrats on that. And I know one of your main themes is, before we get into, we're going to be chatting about the veggies I have this week and getting some brainstorming going on about them. But before that, I'd want to hear a little bit more about Food Fidelity. And one phrase that I picked up on prominently in your site is this idea of modern take on soul food. I like the sound of that. Sounds tasty and interesting, but tell us more about what your interpretation of that is.
Yeah, for me, people have a lot of different associations when they think of soul food, but I think the one thing that's consistent is this idea of kind of Southern like soul food grounded in a few iconic dishes, right? So you have fried chicken, you have collard greens, you have black eyed peas and watermelon, but that's like the box that most people limit the idea of soul food to. And for me, I think there are 2 aspects that I try to really like focus on, and it kind of led me to the term modern soul food. The first is kind of the origin story, right? If you think about like soul food, like going back to like Africa, right?
Yep.
African, food cuisine is very much grounded in, it's very veggie centric and it's
Yep.
very local.
Right. Right.
And then you have like your grains and when it comes to like protein, it's more like your lean protein. So a lot of fish, a lot of chicken, maybe some lamb, but not a lot of beef, pork, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and
Which
so
is
for me,
the assumption a lot of people are going to bring to the table,
yeah.
right?
And so, and if you were to look at like the food pyramid for an African diet, it would
Mm-hmm.
be the inverse of like a Western diet, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
the meat part would be at the bottom because it's a small part of the plate,
Right.
whereas the grains and the vegetable will be more near the top.
Yep.
And so that was my starting point, like really. And so I really wanted a food blog that highlighted the cool factor of vegetables. And when you study like the slave trade and kind of like the diaspora and kind of how African people ended up in these different locations, they brought that aspect with them,
Right.
right? And so I always talk about the fact that soul food is like the original fusion food
Right.
because it's an intersection of, in America, you got the Native Americans, you got Europeans, and you have the African slaves, and a lot of the food that came out of that is a result of that interaction. And it's the same when you look at the Caribbean, South America, et cetera. So that was a big part of like really kind of wanted that to be the foundation. The modern part is there's a generation of people who grew up watching their mother or grandparents cook 3 hours, 4 hour long days of like cooking this very involved, intricate meal. When you talk about kind of traditional soul food,
Mm.
yet today, like those kids those people who were kids then, they live in households where it's dual income. You got mixed families. There's travel. There are all these different like modern considerations that our grandmothers and great grandmothers didn't have to consider.
Yep.
That make it very challenging to produce, those meals. And so for me, like, okay, how can I solve for that?
Yep.
And modern soul food is really kind of taking the traditional ingredients, but putting a modern spin in terms of technique,
Mm-hmm.
fusing like the flavors from, we're globally, focused these days, right? People
Right.
travel, people see cooking shows, people read cookbooks that have a more global bent. And so you want to integrate the stuff that's going on now with the stuff that's from your childhood and from your past. And so I'm trying to modify and simplify that for people who still want to kind of honor the culture, but
Yep.
don't have the time or maybe the skills or resources to do it in a way that's authentic, right? And so for me, that's what the modern soul food part is about. I just say it's really my interpretation of what soul food could be.
Yeah.
Right? So I take some liberty, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I love that concept because, like you say, I could see without that kind of an idea, it's either like if you don't have the time to spend all day cooking, you think, oh, I just can't go there. I got to do something totally different. And I know you were saying that early on. You said it's veggie tends to be the roots are very veggie centric, whole grains and stuff. And when we were chatting before we hit record, you said you do some of your own growing and connect with local farms and farmers. If you could speak to that, obviously our show's focus on local food. Sounds like you're all about that too. Maybe just see how that comes into play into what you're cooking.
Yeah. I was very fortunate I grew up with my two grandparents. My grandmother was probably more of a traditional, when you think of like iconic soul food, she was that big mama, like, right. She was cooking, yams, ham
Right.
hocks, all of that.
Yeah.
Whereas my grandfather grew up they both grew up in East Texas, but my grandfather's parents were sharecroppers. And
Okay.
so he grew up on a plantation where they farmed. And so he had this really strong appreciation for, growing your own vegetables and growing your own food. And so, he instilled that into me like I think I was probably the only of his children or grandkids who really kind of paid attention to that. So we had even though we lived in the city, we had a backyard where he had like a plot, just for like certain vegetables.
Hmm.
And we spent a lot of time at farmers markets. Didn't have a lot of money, but he was a mechanic, and so he would do chores and basically trade services for produce at the
Oh,
farmers market in
great.
Dallas. And so I was always tagging along. So I saw that. I saw the relationships that he built with farmers, and so that left an impression.
Yep.
And so as I got older, I started to kind of take on some of those characteristics. And at the time, I lived in Chicago before moving back to Texas, and you would have a short window to grow food. And so I actually was curious and started to do like kind of hydroponic stuff indoors, as
Hmm.
well as kind of having some things in the short season. And so when I moved to Texas, it was moved back to Texas. I had just a lot more opportunity, with the longer window. And so we built some plots in my backyard, in my alley. And then also I'm fortunate to live in a neighborhood where we have like a community garden. And so
Okay.
I'm one of the kind of co-managers of that garden.
Oh, very
So we
cool.
grow a fair amount and do a fair amount of trading with seeds and vegetables. And then
Hmm.
we also have a really strong farmers market community here.
Yep.
And so, in my 6, 7 years of being back, I've been able to kind of build relationships with a lot of those guys. And so, every weekend, what I don't grow, I buy from them. I don't
Hmm.
hunt, but there are farmers that I source meat from, or, my local butcher.
Oh,
But that's been my routine.
oh wow! So very grounded in local food. Excellent. Do you what's I know Texas, like like you said, you have a much longer window for growing things than we do up here in New England. Probably more similar to Chicago. So, like, what's in season? And what's coming out of your garden these days?
Yeah, right now, a lot of summer squash, a lot of okra, a lot of tomatoes. You know, I'm a big fan of Caribbean food, so I'm growing a lot of different peppers.
Oh, okay.
Both hot and sweet.
Yep.
Um, so a lot of cucumbers, watermelon.
Nice.
Yeah. So and our seasons are pretty long, and so
Yep.
I'm growing through the winter. Like,
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh,
yeah,
even really all season. Nice. Nice. So as we promised, we have some veggies that I wanted to do some brainstorming with, and I'm curious to see what direction you might take some of them for. So the first I want to talk about is green beans, a very common vegetable, that tends to grow pretty well, and I got a big bunch of it, and it's one of those things sometimes I just throw on and don't do. I'm focused on the entree and don't do maybe steam it or something. So, you got any creative ideas for me to do with these green beans?
yeah. There are two recipes that I'm fond of. One is more about me because it's got meat in it, but the other is vegan because my
Yeah.
wife and daughter are vegan.
Oh,
Um, so the first one, the one that has meat, it's a combination. It's a fusion of Haitian cuisine and kind of Southern. And
oh,
I'd call it a smothered green beans recipe.
yeah.
Right. So, but it's basically taking green beans and sauteing them in um, fat from ground andouille sausage.
Okay. Oh, nice.
But I mix the Haitian part is Haitians have what's called épice seasoning. It's very much like a sofrito or mirepoix if you do French cooking or
Yeah.
Creole.
Yep.
But it's like peppers and herbs and onions that you grind up, that you puree into a seasoning base, and they
Okay.
use it to flavor all of their dishes. It's excellent. Like, it's very easy to make,
Yep.
but a lot of fresh ingredients, and it's a good way to season vegetables. And so I saute the ground sausage with the eppies, and
Mm.
then add some chicken stock and just let it simmer
Ooh.
with the green beans. And so we call that, it's a take on smothered green beans.
Mm-hmm.
So the gravy is from the epi seasoning and the
Yep.
sausage, right? And so that's one. The other is more of a kind of a stewed, green bean. So it's an instant pot recipe. So I
Okay.
don't know how much you cook with an instant pot.
I should.
Like,
I don't break it out as much as I should. It's so convenient, right?
yeah, so like the pressure cooker's been like a great way to, because what I've learned in my, looking at my emails, I get a lot of requests for, hey, you got instant pot recipes, and so
Yeah.
back to a whole modern cuisine standpoint, people are trying to get stuff fast, but they
Hmm.
want it to be like what they're accustomed to, and a pressure cooker is a great way to do that. And so I use fire roasted tomatoes with a homemade kind of Cajun based seasoning,
Mm.
where
Yeah.
it's just cayenne pepper, ground cayenne pepper, smoked paprika, garlic, onions,
Hmm.
with just the green beans and the roasted tomatoes. I like fire roasted tomatoes, but San Marzano tomatoes are excellent as well.
Hmm.
They work well in a pressure cook, and it comes together really quick. And so those are the two that we eat a lot in our house as far as green beans go.
Oh, that sounds both sound delicious to me. The Haitian one has, I there's a friend locally that's Haitian and does she did this dinner where she was teaching how to cook some Haitian dishes, and but she was going so fast. I have to confess, I enjoyed the meal and the food, but I didn't quite get it all down. So you have to definitely try your green bean recipe because both of those sound like they also have a lot of flavor. Which is that a theme? I don't traditionally think of soul food as being particularly spicy per se, but it sounds like you're bringing a lot of that to your cooking as well.
Yeah, I'd say it's spicy, but not in a hot that you
Yeah.
can enjoy. Like, right, it's well seasoned, and I would describe it as kind of interesting and complex, right? Because there are a lot of different spices that you're mixing,
Yep.
and I think that's the DJ part of my personality, like trying to like find different sounds and make them kind of blend together in harmony.
Yep.
I'm the same way when it comes to cooking in terms of you have your spices, you have your herbs,
Hmm.
and then you have like your vegetables and maybe some oils. But where can I kind of bring flavor in to just
Yep.
make something that's very basic more interesting?
Oh, that's great. And I think we jumped into talking about the recipes, and I know you've got that music side. So I understand you got a song suggestion for all your recipes. You giving us an example of one of those green beans. You got a tune that you'd suggest with it. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So the thing with a song, the way I describe it is like every recipe that I create, there is a song that's an ingredient, and so I actually look at it as like an integral part of the
Hmm.
recipe. And part of that is when you talk about soul food, you're putting a part of you into the dish when you cook it. Like, right,
Yep.
anybody can look at a recipe and recreate it, like just follow the directions. But when you cook, I always challenge people to or try to inspire people to put a part of themselves into it. And for
Yep.
me, the music part kind of like helps to shape my mood,
Yep. Yep.
and the mood that I'm in really impacts kind of how the dish comes out. And so for a smothered green beans dish,
Hmm.
that's a very soulful recipe. And so you think about more kind of classic, soul, songs. So like maybe it's a James Brown or Aretha Franklin,
Yep.
type of song that goes with that. But
Hmm.
then when you add, kind of a fusion element to it, maybe it's, a Haitian artist who is doing soul, doing his interpretation of a James Brown song,
Oh yeah.
right?
Nice.
Or maybe more jazz because of the fusion element,
Hmm.
right? And so that's kind of like how the music fits in out. The odds are when I'm cooking, the music's on, and
Right.
I'm kind of grooving to it. But yeah, that's how that all kind of comes together.
That's great. It's a great concept. All my dishes come with wine pairing, so you've got the music pairing. So, but I like the idea because the food isn't like we don't have it in isolation, right? It's
Yeah,
you've got your inspiration as you're
yeah.
cooking.
Well, I'm gonna have to get some tips from you then, because my wife's a big wine drinker, and
Oh,
I'm pretty
cool. I
slow,
definitely
and I
could hit.
need to get better at the pairings.
Cool. All right. Well, so I also have some kale. We've had a lot of kale, which I cook a lot, but it's been rolling in every week in the CSA. So I make a lot of pesto with it, but you can only go that well so many times. Right? I need some new ideas.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, we're doing a lot of grilling here in Texas. Like, I mean, again, the weather's pretty hot, most of year round, and so my grill's up quite a bit. But I did a grilled butternut squash salad with kale,
Ooh, delish.
and basically put kind of half moon slices on a grill,
Hmm.
and kind of season up the squash and cook that on the grill. And then the salad is it's kale, it's dried cherries,
Hmm.
it's wheat berries, goat cheese. But my favorite part to really kind of bring it all together is the actual vinaigrette. It's a simple vinaigrette, but it's got some different things going on.
Yep.
So the vinaigrette is it's maple syrup,
Yep.
it is balsamic vinegar,
Hmm.
then your olive oil. But my favorite is garam masala, spice.
Oh, nice. Which I love, but I wouldn't think of to put in a salad. I cook Indian food sometimes.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it goes well with the sweetness of the and the smokiness of the butternut squash,
Yep.
and obviously the kale gives it the salad essence. But it's raw, which I like, so it works out pretty well.
Oh, that sounds delicious and very, very creative. So I can really see that fusion thing coming into play, like garam masala into a dish like that. So, or do you have are you all kind of self-taught? Or you have training in cooking? Definitely.
Yeah, I'm self-taught, but I spent a fair amount of time in kitchens. Once upon a time, I used to travel for. I was a long story, but I was a basketball coach, and I coached basketball in Europe
Oh,
and,
wow.
and occasionally in Asia. But I did more cooking than I did coaching. So
Okay.
and so I would literally just kind of hang out in kitchens during my off time, and I'm a very visual learner, so I can pick up a lot of stuff. And like I said before, both of my grandparents are amazing cooks, and
Hmm.
so I spent a lot of my childhood in the kitchen watching them, and then later I actually learned a lot working in my local barbecue restaurant in my neighborhood.
Oh,
So it's
awesome.
good. So
Those are definitely great ways to train, and grandparents' kitchens, and then a local restaurant like that. That's awesome. And I know we were originally going to talk about cabbage, but I saw you do some interesting things with cabbage. It looked like on your blog, and I've been again getting a lot. And in fact, I just cooked. You get so much out of it. I like used half of this big head of purple cabbage. It's like
yeah,
more. What am I
yeah.
doing?
Yeah, I eat. It's weird. Cabbage. I probably eat at least once a week. That's probably my favorite
Yeah.
vegetable. Partially because it's so easy to make and it works with pretty much any flavor, any ingredient. But I'm in Texas, and so we do a lot of brisket here in Texas. We eat a lot of brisket, and at our farmers market, um, I have access to a lot of. There's a local barbecue spot that has a spot at the farmers market,
Yep.
and so they give me a lot of their scraps because I use it to flavor a lot of food, and
Oh yeah.
so I was able to get a pretty large fat cap from a brisket that was that was already smoked,
Yeah.
and so I used it to make fried cabbage and kale,
Oh yeah.
and so I took the fat cap and just put it in oil and let it just simmer until the till it rendered in the oil, and then chopped up cabbage and kale along with some other vegetables and just let it saute in that goodness. And it was great.
That's
My daughter was a little upset because she couldn't eat it, but lots of flavor. But again, it's just trying to figure out different ways because I eat so much cabbage. I
mhm.
have to like find different ways to cook it. Some
Yeah,
healthy,
that's
some not healthy, right? So
right, right. But I love the way it sounds like you've got those relationships at the farmers market to pick up. I'm guessing that might have just been discarded or something if you didn't come along to use it.
yeah, yep,
Yeah,
yeah, definitely not going to waste anything if I can.
yeah. I'm with you. I think you and I have similar in the sense. I wouldn't say you obviously have different focus in your cuisine, but the idea of vegetables, playing a central role. But we do eat meat and fish at our house too. But some of my best dishes, I feel like the meat is like it's just enough to flavor everything else that's there. And but I'm curious in that regard, and because I deal with this a little in our house too. If you have any tips for, probably is not uncommon in today's families to have someone in the house who is, you want to have meat sometimes, others in your family don't. You have any strategies for prepping or just how you go about prepping or meal planning to
Yeah.
satisfy everyone around the table?
Yeah, so Sunday is my work day essentially, right? That's where I do all my meal prep, and the way I approach it, because like I said, my daughter and wife are vegan. My son is, I don't know what he is. It depends on the week,
Okay.
um, and I'd say I'm more of a flexitarian in terms of like,
Yep.
I skew more vegetable, but I like meat and
Yep.
certainly create. And so my approach is typically I do a couple of things. One, I make a bunch of sauces
Hmm.
each Sunday. So maybe like three different sauces on a Sunday.
Yep.
And so just to kind of give people kind of options to like kind of how they flavor
Oh
their
yeah.
food. And then I will also roast vegetables. So like I literally will just take a baking sheet and put a lot of different vegetables on it and
Yep.
just roast them all like together in bulk.
Yep.
Um, and so, we do kind of a bowl concept, so people can make their own bowls.
Okay.
Um, the meat I don't prep. I do that. Whenever if we're gonna have it that night, I'll just kind of grill or saute a quick protein. Just cook it for the house. Cooking for the blog is a little different,
Yeah.
but just cooking for the house, that's really my approach. And so what I find is people can customize how they want because they have the different sauce options. They have the vegetables. Um, I just kind of get a sense of kind of what vegetables that they want.
Mhm.
And over time, you kind of figure out people's habits. And so that's what I do. But more often than not, I'm buying what's available at the farmer's market and kind of what we've, are able to kind of pull out of the garden that week.
Oh,
I just cook enough of it so people can change it up. And then we make a big batch of rice or, whatever grain that we want to. We do a lot of couscous and a lot of fonio, which is,
yeah.
pretty common in African cooking.
Yep.
And then a lot of legumes, whether it's beans or lentils and stuff like that for the
Mhm.
proteins for the vegans.
Yeah, that sounds delicious. Yeah, that's a great approach. I like you said, bowls are a nice thing. People have different options, different sauces, because everybody, yeah, you need the sauce, whether it's meat or the vegan folks. Nice. Do you have any other? It sounds like you developed some really good techniques for cooking efficiently. Any other before we wrap? Any other great tips for Sounds like yours. I know you have a day job that keeps you busy, so you have to be pretty efficient in the kitchen. Any other tip that maybe is not super well known that you'd like to share before we part?
Yeah, I mean, people get bored, and so it's always I want to have flavor on hand, so I don't want to have to like kind of create it. So for me, what that looks like is I may have a bottle of oil like for this week.
Hmm.
That's there's fresh thyme and garlic and maybe Mexican dried chilies that are
Mm.
infused in the oil while it sits. And so when I get ready to saute a vegetable, like if it's onions or broccoli or whatever, like that's a quick way to do it. Like, right, it doesn't require me to do it. It's just sitting on the countertop. I can
Mm.
add that to a skillet, and my kids are like, "Oh, this is great!" Like I spent a whole lot of time doing, but I didn't. I just literally kind of pre-seasoned some oil before, and so I do a lot of stuff like that.
Okay.
Um, or I may take the brine out of like something that's, like we have a lot of like pickled vegetables or pickle roast peppers. I'll use that brine in a vinegar, a vinaigrette. And for me, a vinaigrette is simply oil, salt, and pepper, and then whatever briny ingredient I have in the house.
Yep.
I don't overthink it. And again, you can get briny stuff from different vinegars,
Hmm.
from prepackaged stuff, and so that's kind of my approach. And then I just cook vegetables and proteins in a very basic manner, and
Hmm.
rely on those seasonings that I've kind of pre-made.
Oh, that's a great tip. And so that's actually a good segue to say, I know you have a lot of these tips and techniques and recipes on your blog. So you want to give us the basic info and where people can find more about what you've been sharing here?
Yeah, so all the recipes are on my website, foodfidelity.com. I'm also on Instagram. I've gotten a lot more active on Instagram. Probably spend more time on YouTube doing more video because that's
Oh,
been a request of a lot of
nice.
people. So, but it's all under the handle of Food Fidelity.
Perfect. And any of the specific recipes, we'll follow up afterwards, and we'll link to the ones we chatted about here on the show and our show notes. So another way people can find them. But that's Marwin from Food Fidelities. Thanks so much for coming in and sharing all your knowledge and tasty expertise.
I appreciate it. It's great being on. It's always great to talk about food. So thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Cook Local, Eat Local. To get the show notes with links for recipes and resources we covered today, go to cooklocaleatlocal.com to get the podcast landing page. And please be sure to subscribe to Cook Local, Eat Local wherever you get your podcasts. Make it a great day with some tasty local food on your plate.